right now.
Uh-oh.
I don't have any alcohol.
All right. Welcome to the Church of Mabus. I'm live now, right now, right? Yep.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Everybody's live. You're listening to United Public Radio, 107.7. And it's 7:11 p.m. Central. And it's been a long week. This Mercury retrograde's grinding the meatballs, let me tell you. It's like just nonstop. And of course, here we still have the hospice situation. I'm helping Christina with her grandmother, and it's something, I tell you. I was trying to play Richard Gere, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Deaf and Dying, and listening to it. That was helping just some comforting things about it. Because my stepfather's passed away, my dad's passed away, but I wasn't really, well, I saw my dad's body when he passed away. And for the stepdad, I kind of like just didn't stick around. He was like in a state to where I didn't help with it. And I couldn't be there anyway, just the state he was in. But this is the first time I've really had to deal with a situation like that. I mean, I've had people pass away, but really like be there, while they're going through it. And it sucks. But it has pros to it. I've always had hangups about death, so hopefully it helps in some way with all that with me. But it's definitely, I mean, she's 90 something and could go at any point. And when you think they are, she doesn't. And, next thing you know, she's kind of up, but she's still kind of bedbound. But it's definitely a learning experience. So it's good for me to see it because, well, we all headed to that lonesome valley, whether we like it or not. I guess that's the worst part of it. It's like, this is going to happen to me one day. That's what I was telling Joe. I need some World War II cyanide capsules when I get sick.
Well, you just I just hope that I'm not that old, I'm perfectly happy to be gone in the next 15 years because I don't want to know what the world's going to be like. But I've been saying that since I was like 12 and I've been forced to survive. So hard to know.
It's definitely something, but it's educational. And tonight's guest, Asherah, and did I say that correctly? And how do I say the VII? Is that like a Roman numeral? I want to make sure. Okay,
yes, it's Asherah VII.
Asherah VII. Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, it's great to have you here, and definitely looking forward to it. And I guess if you could give us a little bit of background about yourself. How did you get into the paranormal or get into a path of doing stuff like this?
Well, I was always really interested in everything paranormal, supernatural, weird, unexplained. But I had what I call an awakening at 12 years old. I was nearly 13 years old. And after that awakening, I experienced a ton of paranormal activity. It started with precognizant dreams, and then it went over to seeing spirits. And I don't see spirits. I didn't see spirits as people then. They were just shadows. And then after that, I kind of shied away from a lot of the paranormal. I would go if I had somebody with me, but a lot of times I was a little nervous. But I would do some little things here and there with my friends. Like we'd sneak into abandoned properties and investigate them. And most of my research in the early stages was couch research. It was just watching documentaries on Bigfoot, Loch Ness, and things like that. It wasn't until I got a little older, got a little more brave, that I really went full force in with the spiritual side of paranormal research. And that's mostly what I did up until about 7 years ago now, when I started researching Bigfoot. And then from there, it grew. I was like, well, if I'm going to research Bigfoot, I'm going to research everything I can find. So now I research anything. I'll research anything. And the great part about that is my group, it's a group of me and just one other person. So when we do researching, we are able to build a new group around each investigation based on people's specialties, based on the investigator specialties. People, I'm not saying they're experts, but specializing in something is just, that's your specialty. That's where you really put all your time and effort. So I'm willing to research anything, and I can build a team around whatever I'm researching. So it's kind of nice.
And as far as paranormal experiences, what were some of your first ones that you've had?
The one that I remember, the very first one I remember, I would always have little things happen around me, and they were very easily explained away, but it started to get to where it was like very curious to me. But then when I saw him, that's what really freaked me out. So I saw him coming out of my bathroom and going into the room that's kind of diagonal and across the hall. And it was only a quick little flit of a shadow, but that's when I knew that something paranormal was going on. My parents would talk about ghosts here and there because they had a lot of experiences growing up. And they would hush it, but they would also talk about it a little bit here and there. So it was like candy to me. I was like, oh, ghost, So I knew what I saw was a ghost. And then my mom saw it. So that's when she started to believe me about the things that I was experiencing. But that was my first real paranormal experience where I knew it was something ghostly.
And I hear a little bit of feedback. Does anyone else hear that? I
I
hear a little.
do as well.
It's not that bad, but lately there's been some little weird things like that, but it's not. I don't think it's anything too bad. But
You try to disconnect and reconnect.
okay, well,
Yeah, I don't hear anything.
A lot of times I just hear it on mine, so maybe it's just something mine does, but she hears it too. Well, it's okay. I don't think it's anything that's going to interrupt anything, because I know lately on Skype when we use the phone, it does it too, and you listen later and it doesn't really affect it at all. But so you said him. Who's him? A ghost?
Well, I just felt a male presence from him, honestly. I still feel him today. I feel like maybe he's always been with me and I just wasn't able to know that until I had my awakening. But yeah, he's still with me today. And he goes, well, he was coined the name Paul, but that's a bigger story. That's really not his name. It was a misfire of communication where I thought I was talking to him and I was talking to another spirit.
Yeah. And my experiences that got us doing the show just briefly was testicular cancer at 17, and I had to go through chemo and stuff. And then a year or more later, my dad died. So it was just like all this stuff that I was like, what in the hell's going on? And I started to have weird experiences where I think it may have been him, I know, visiting, and he was part of that, from seeing beings of light. And I've had a lot of weird UFO stuff that's just, I don't know what the hell it is, but it's followed me from house to house. I don't think I've been abducted or anything, but I've seen weird stuff that seems to attract to me for some reason. But that's pretty much what led to do the show. So just finding out from other people what they're going through, it helps, and trying to raise consciousness and things like that about these subjects. But when it comes to Bigfoot, have you had any of those kind of experiences?
Yeah, I feel like I've had quite a few. In those experiences, I didn't see anything though. I will say that. But like heavy breathing in the brush that's not from an animal that I recognize. But my real big experience was when I was going on a hike with a few friends, and we went looking for signs of Bigfoot. So it's not like we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into, but we were up there a little too long, and we got caught up there at night, kind of got surrounded and corralled out. Never saw them then either, but they did charge us, but they stood out of our flashlight range just perfectly.
So when it comes to Bigfoot, are you on a particular team, like team physical or team paranormal, or either or?
Here's the great thing about the way my brain works is I am okay with whatever. I'll research whatever it branches off to. So I don't lean towards one way or the other. I actually am a little split pretty evenly. I think a lot of Bigfoot experiences might be something hijacking the appearance of a Bigfoot, like a tulpa or an egregore, which egregores don't usually change forms. But then there's also the flesh and blood, where there's a lot of physical evidence that goes along with these creatures that you just can't ignore. That's paranormal things don't leave behind. So I feel like some of it's paranormal. It's like a hijacking of their figure. And then other parts, I would feel like it is very physical. I think that they do, even if they're physical, they do have attributes that we don't understand and capabilities that we don't understand. We just found out recently that cows graze north, and that's always been a rumor. Or tigers have infrasound. So, I mean, there's potential for a new type of capability that we aren't able to study yet.
And what was the second thing you mentioned? Because I know you said tulpa, and I'm familiar with those, but what was the second thing that you mentioned?
An egregore.
What is that? I've never heard that term.
The
mean?
difference, they're very similar. However, the difference between a tulpa and an egregore is an egregore is intentionally created in sort of a tribe type setting. It's intentional. They're there for a job. They give them a job, and a lot of times it's to protect an area or to watch over a space. Versus a tulpa can be created accidentally with just one very strong, very psychically strong person or multiple people, like the Philip experiment, where they basically created a ghost.
And the tulpa, I think I've heard that from like Twin Peaks and stuff. It's kind of like that, right? Wham, that's a connection there.
Yeah. Except what's being what's being portrayed there would be more like an egregore, or even more specifically a kind of a cross between an egregore and a doppelganger in some cases. I mean, when you go into the third series, the third season of Twin Peaks, some of the beings, like when there are 3 iterations of Cooper, the third iteration of Cooper, which is the character Doogie, is sort of a cross between an egregore and a doppelganger in a way, or a kind of a probable self in some kind of fashion. He's there for a reason. It's almost like he's a shell. He's not either one of those people. He's a third kind of person, but he also has his own existence in a way. It's sort of but it's not the classic tulpa. They use the term tulpa in the show, but if you're looking at the actual what a tulpa actually is, according to the tradition that talks about them, which is Tibetan Buddhism, it's not exactly that.
I'm not familiar with the show that you're talking about, but you're describing the way that you're explaining it. It sounds very accurate. How you explained it, how they showed it versus how it's supposed to be, and you're right on with how it's supposed to be.
Well, there's Twin Peaks. It's by David Lynch. If you ever would have really watched some weird stuff that makes you go, "What in the hell?" You just look up David Lynch and Twin Peaks and his movies.
I'll have to check it out.
The only caveat is that wherever it's streaming now, because it's moving from Netflix to something else, usually in the streaming version, they leave out, in the first 2 seasons, they leave out the Log Lady intros. And without the Log Lady intros, you miss about 30% of the meaning of the story.
That's
so weird. Yeah, so it's you've got to have the Log Lady intro.
Kind of, for me, it's a show that I'm good, but a lot of what the hell's happening. Those are good, but I don't know what the hell. I still may not know. Wham probably knows more definitely.
Oh, I'm a Twin Peaks banana. I'm banana.
They're fun, but they had it return on Showtime. There was Twin Peaks Return. There's 9 Inch Nails did some music for it in the new series, so that was really good. I forget the song, but so I guess my next question, something I've dealt with here with my fiance Christina, is we're going through hospice with her grandmother, and she has dementia. And me and Christina have always had weird things happen and attracted kind of things. But this here is just like there's some weird stuff going on here that I've never experienced before. A lot of anxieties. I guess that's from death and dying. There was a weird glass incident where a glass blew up in the house, and it was not hot then cold. It had fruit cocktail on it. It was a thick crystal glass, and it just shattered. Like, there's been weird stuff here, so we're always trying to. I've been burning white sage, playing stuff from YouTube, from angel house clearings to Christianity, whatever, shamanism, whatever I can find, because it seems like I'm like, when the glass thing happened, every horror movie I've ever thought of comes to mind, and I know how those all end. So I get paranoid. But I know you've dealt with things like spirits in negative situations. So what got you into that? Did something happen in particular?
Well, first, I'm sure you already have heard this from others, but I would suggest maybe focusing less on the activity, more on the people in the house. So a lot of times when you get into a liminal state, which is the in-between state where there's adjustment and there's a lot of change happening and you're going from one transition to another, like you're in transition phase, a lot of times that tends to bring on activity. It's like that liminal state causes chaos enough to where it pulls in what's a lot of times seems like a negative activity. What the source is, I still have yet to hear a good explanation of why that tends to happen in liminal states. I have my own theories. I think it's the fact that there's nobody really in a set schedule. So to be able to pull the focus onto a being in order to get that attention that it needs to thrive, they are able to come in and rob that attention a lot easier if somebody's not on a set schedule. They're very easier distracted. So I would maybe suggest sage is good. And the reason I say sage is because it doesn't get rid of spirits, but it will calm the spirits. But it also is scientifically proven to have a calming effect on people too. So I feel like if you can calm the people in the house as much as you can and be open and talking and not holding emotions in, I think that you'll see a difference in the amount of activity you're experiencing.
Yeah.
But as far as what got me
I've been doing
into
sage more, and I felt some changes.
yeah, and sage is a really good calming scent. So it won't just calm any entities you have in your home. It'll also calm the people down, which could be causing the activity in a roundabout way. So, but as far as the go ahead. Okay. As far as the researching the more negative sides of paranormal, that really stems from when I was growing up. I was misunderstood. I was viewed as evil because of the things that I tapped into, the things I would research, and the things that would interest me. I grew up in a very religious family, and I was shunned, and I was considered evil. And I knew that it was a complete misunderstanding of my character. So when I heard all these people talking about all these evil spirits that are out there, I'm like, this can't be right. There's not that many evil things out there. So I made it my goal over my research lifetime, my research career, I've made it my goal to really, I go and I help the entities more than I help the people, but I still end up helping the people too. So my fight right now is for the entities and the kids who suffer from entities. So that's my focal point when I go and do a residential case. Go ahead.
Oh, and why did they shun you? I mean, what made them upset?
Well, in Christianity, a lot of the views in many religions are that entities, no matter how they act, no matter how they treat you, no matter what they do, it's a demon. So everything is demons in their eyes. So growing up in a family like that, when you're researching what they're calling demons, you start to realize that there's a total misconception a lot of times based on who's researching. And I would go into a place that's called, the Hell House, and I'd find out that it's really just a non-human entity who's kind of like a trickster, not evil, can get up to no good, but it's not a demon. So, and a lot of times when you work with those spirits, they tend to almost change. I feel like they tend to give back the energy that's given.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and definitely there's different types of entities, and I know what you mean by that. And that was one of my big things when I saw light beings with my physical eyes, completely sober, leave my house one day, and you have to differentiate. I think maybe they were deceased loved ones or something, but I wasn't 100% sure what they are. And you always have that, raised up in Georgia in the Bible Belt, the devil can be a shining light. So you're like, you get paranoid. Am I seeing, what am I seeing? But I think it was something positive in the end. But I understand what you mean by that. But I think, there's definitely a little bit of everything probably, and bad and good, or demons and angels or whatever. I mean, a long time ago, demon, I've heard used to mean interstellar traveler. I read that from somewhere, but so the
I think is that more Damon? I think, or no?
Damon.
Well, the term demon comes from the Greek daemon.
Yeah. But yeah. I thought that at some point they tried to separate it by differentiating the two somehow.
Well, that was something that was done during the Christian period, when it was used. The term daemon was used to designate all of those non-Christian entities. Originally, they weren't demons; they were just sort of like the non-Christian entities. And then over time, they became more demonic, if you will.
Yeah.
And that was just, originally, my understanding is that the original Greek means like the inner voice inside, that sort of interior voice. Like for example, Socrates, he talks about his daemon speaking to him, and what's meant by that is his inner voice, his inner awareness, his inner intuition.
I see.
And providing, it was connected to conscience.
Okay.
The psyche, which was kind of a word for the soul. And so it was sort of like the inner awareness or spark of a person, an essence of a person, in a sense, or your connection to the divine. I don't know if it originally meant interstellar travel, or it might have referred to something like that at some point, because the Greeks certainly believed that the stars spoke through us. So maybe that's what that connection was. I've never actually heard that, Jeffrey. That was interesting. Remember who said that?
I'm not sure where I heard it, but I heard it from somewhere. Could be like Dungeons and Dragons or something.
And then who knows where it came from, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to get some water. Keep talking.
Okay. And my experiences seem to, one thing I've noticed with this phenomenon with people is suffering seems to give you gifts. And that's kind of you going through testicular cancer and all that.
I think he's frozen that. Yeah, he's having some connectivity issues.
Shamanic stuff, so to speak.
You cut out a little bit.
You're having connectivity issues, Jeffrey. Here, let me try to message him.
Well, when I was doing, I didn't do a whole lot of research on the term daemon, but when I did my research, I guess I didn't do enough research on it, because what I came up with is sort of like a familiar. It was an external figure of a word of wise, basically.
Okay. Yes. I was having a little bit of internet trouble. So
there we go. Yeah. There we go. I just messaged you about it, so.
Thanks, Mercury retrograde.
I'd love to hear what you were saying, though, because it was interesting. You was talking about how when you go through suffering, it changes you.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Yeah. Sure. Well, and okay, that's I attribute that to a sort of awakening. It's like, I know, and I hate to compare it, but there's ways that you can go through awakenings. A lot of times in your early life, it usually happens if you've been through a lot of traumatic events. That tends to open up a sort of suffering and open up abilities, gifts, or attractions of spirits that just seem to continuously come to people, or UFOs. You always having these UFO experiences. But as an older person, if you haven't already been through an awakening, a lot of times the only way that's going to happen is if you go through an NDE, near-death experience. And that's because it's a very quick burst of a traumatic event that awakens something inside of you, like long-term traumatic events would as a child. But it seems like in today's world, you're getting people who are full-grown adults who are coming into their own, like as if a child would at 12, 13, up to 16 years old. So it's very strange. And I think it's another sign that there's a very unique change going on with the world.
Well, something's happening.
Sure. Wham, anything you'd like to add? Yeah,
to
I'm
what?
checking my internet. If you want
to. Oh, you're checking your internet. That's why you want to add things. Okay. Well, I think that I mean, I guess I subscribe to the belief that the main reason that we're here is to try to understand the processes of creation, basically. And so we're in a very focused arena where we learn about the different levels of cause and effect. There's the simple level of cause and effect, sort of, that occurs, at the sort of mundane physical level. But then there's all kinds of other levels of cause and effect, like the simultaneity of time and all that kind of stuff. And pain is part of that, but and difficulty is part of that. But part of the problem that we've run into with our very focused ego selves is that we've allowed our egos to become so convinced that they're the only things that are real, that it causes, I think, unnecessary pain and unnecessary grief. And I mean, we'll still learn. I think we'll all still learn eventually, we'll get it, but it won't seem that way for a while, it'll be kind of hard, and this is, I'm almost 60 years old. So this has come at, these ideas have come after a lifetime of studying this stuff and having my own difficulties. I was raised apparently similarly to you. And I don't know about you, but all of those beliefs in my life were reinforced by fists and pretty profound physical and mental abuse. So, every soul comes into this world to try to figure some of that stuff out. And, we do the best we can some of the time. Sometimes I don't know if people do the best if they can do, but that's not my judgment to make. So, but suffering, if you let suffering change, suffering will change you either in a positive or negative way. So, a lot of people allow suffering to close themselves down, and just cut themselves off. And I have found that actually when I do that, I suffer more. So I've had to learn to stop doing that, because nothing's going to really protect you from life. You're going to have to go through it. So you might as well just, as the good Vikings would have it, Jeffrey, you might as well just embrace it in courage and just say, you know what? This is my suffering, damn it. And I'm going to go and I'm going to try to be happy anyway. We can't say the F word, but can we do the finger?
Probably not.
I won't. But I'll do this, and people know what I mean, right?
Yeah, it honestly, the unfortunate part about it is I feel like, this is my belief, I feel like your spirit, and I hate to, be the one that talks about ascension, but it's true. Your spirit has to hit a certain growth to be able to ascend where we really all want to be. And that's the bottom line. So how long is it going to take you? unfortunately, we learn the best in hard situations. We're forced to get through it, basically. And the people that can get through it, they are the strong ones. They are the ones that are capable and able to learn from it. And like you said, sometimes it'll break people. And the people that it does break, they don't grow from it. So I feel like a lot of times when you get a lot of suffering in your life, it's because you're at a point where it's time for you to hurry up and hit that soul growth that you need to hit in order to be at the level where you're supposed to be. It's unfortunate, but it's true. We learn a lot through our suffering.
Yeah.
And it's just, I feel like that's why when you're suffering so hard, it's like you're moving up levels too fast. And it's like you hit that breaking point, and that's what your awakening is.
Yeah, if you let it. But that's also why we're supposed to help each other. You know, I mean, it's like, oh, see, he just lost him right there.
I was like, he looked shocked. He got froze while he was shocked.
Yeah, no, he lost
it.
Yeah, he's been having some trouble. They live in a rural area, so occasionally they have some issues with all that. But yeah, I mean, but to me, that's why we help each other, like I was saying, you know, because it's really, you can't really do this stuff by yourself. Not really, you know, and I don't think we were intended to. So, you know,
unfortunately, I think COVID proved that. I mean, there was so many cases of depression and psychotic breaks and this and that, just because people couldn't talk to people anymore. They couldn't go to the store. We need people, and that's in every aspect, including your abilities and your research and stuff. So you're absolutely right.
Right. And, you know, and people are still suffering from that, you know. I mean, we're still getting used to it. I mean, I live in New York, so we're still, you know, our opening up has been much more gradual than in some other parts of the country. So we're just beginning to come out into the open. And I was just talking to a coworker today about it, about how, you know, it's like we're at the point where it's like, you know, even if you go outside, you don't have to wear a mask. We're still like, don't hug me yet. I don't hug you know, don't hug me. No, you know, and she's like, yeah, I became this weird germaphobe, you know, for the last year in a way that I never had before. And, you know, I think gradually that sort of thing will ease, but, you know, that's a trauma. Everybody's been through that trauma, you know, and it'll take a while for that to, whether we'll learn the important lessons of it or not, I am not entirely sure. There's the man himself.
And speaking of trauma, I think that's a good point, because there's been a lot of trauma, and globally too.
Right.
And I feel like that's where you're getting a lot of these adult awakenings from, is because there's been so much global trauma to people's psyches and abilities to function, that I think that's why we're starting to see a lot of people awakening at this point.
I hope so. I hope that is the case.
Yeah, it's unfortunate of why, but I'm glad that there's something that could come of it that could help us grow as a society.
Well, me too. Are you there, Mr. Man? You're there.
Yes, I am here, and I'm not sure what's happening, but the internet just kept phasing out, and then it threw me out. But Joe re-added me, so I'm back. It's kind of gray out, so maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. It's Coyote walking backwards. It's gotta be Coyote. What is that behind you? The symbols and everything. Is that like a poster?
It's like a multi-meeting symbol that just, it's like the astrological signs, and then there's a little bit of pagan in there. But the reason I bought this is because it looks a lot like a sigil that I saw being drawn during one of my most intense, I don't even know which, psychic connections, vision. I don't even know what to call it, but that's the symbol I saw being drawn. Well, that's not the symbol, but it's very close to that.
It's definitely neat for sure. And I know I've read stuff on ascension and light worker stuff and things like that. And when I've seen those beings of light, I kind of wonder if they're us, and that's kind of, or I'm seeing beings that are in that state, or some, you know, ascension or something like that. And I grew up with Christianity. My dad had some preacher roots. I like Native American and Norse. And when I see those beings, though, I go, well, maybe there is something to be, Christed, or that Christ consciousness, that nirvana. Because if you're glowing and you're like a weird light being that's an energy being, you've obviously reached some kind of plateau of something. So, I mean, there's different ways to look at it. I know for sure. So many different ways. Every culture has their own kind of like enlightenment or whatever.
Sorry about that. That was me
shutting
a window, and it decided to make a weird noise. Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
Twin Peaks. I did watch the first episode of Loki. Of course, I like trickster stuff, but it was really good. I mean, it got like some kind of mixed reviews, but it was still good. A lot of people loved it, and of course, there was the uppity critics that give their crap. But it's basically this guy. I mean, he's playing Loki from the whole Norse mythos, and it's from Marvel and all that stuff. But it's Tom Hiddleston. I don't know, another movie he's done that's really good is Only Lovers Left Alive with Tilda Swinton, where they're vampires, from Jim Jarmusch. That's a really good one. But one other thing, I just saw that Zack Snyder guy who did Army of the Dead, which I enjoyed, and he's done 300. He's doing a Netflix series animated called Twilight of the Gods about Norse and stuff. So that should be good.
Yes.
Looking forward to that. So what do you consider yourself a witch? Is that like a polite term?
I'm not one for labels. If somebody labels me, I'm like, I mean, it's okay. I'm so unique in that it's hard for me to find a real label that suits me. So I've been called a topologist because I've done a lot of research on created energies. I've been called a psychic, a witch, a kitchen witch. Like there's all different kinds of terms of witches. It's hard to really label me. I don't really consider myself a witch. I consider myself a magic worker, I guess is the best way I could put it.
That's a good way. That's like the term shaman or whatever. I've interviewed a lot of them. I probably have some traits from, different books I've read and experiences, but I don't go around, I'm a shaman, dude. Come to my van, stuff like that. But some people do. Some people don't consider it really, a polite thing to say on some levels. They don't say it. But I know there's definitely there's definitely pro ones that know a lot more than I know. So you got to have humility with all this stuff. No doubt about it. But well, I guess when it comes to the pagan, you study Norse and stuff. I mean, what are different things that you've studied? Is it like Wicca, things like that?
Really, I have studied a little bit of everything. A lot of what I do is a lot of people consider it chaos magic. But then there's a dispute on what chaos magic even is. Mm-hmm. My version of chaos magic is you can take attributes from multiple different types of magicry and utilize it based on common knowledge rules of how something works. Some people say that chaos magic involves no rules. I don't believe that. You can't take rose petals that pretty much everybody knows that means love and make it mean hate. That's just not the way it works. There's laws that everything has to live by, including spirits, and just creating your own rules just doesn't work. It doesn't. You're ruling yourself if it does. And that's my opinion. I might be wrong. Some people might be able to really work some good stuff using their own rules. But I feel like everything has rules. And it goes the same way with herbs and everything. Cedar, pine, sage. It all has rules. It all has capabilities. So when you try to change those rules, that's when you're going to run into problems with your magic. So I'm a chaos worker, along with following the rules. But so I've done a little bit of research into all types of magic. Well, I wouldn't say all types, a lot of types. I think he's frozen again.
Oh, did he go away again?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a guy on, I guess it was just last week that we were talking about chaos magic and what chaos magic was. It's interesting. I mean, when I was growing up, what you're describing is what was once called an eclectic witch.
Yeah.
Someone who who picks and chooses and sort of assembles their own set of practices from that. So
Yes.
I don't know if that's a word that has fallen out of use, but
it has. But I have heard people consider me an eclectic witch. Yes.
yeah.
So I do know the term, but it has fallen out of favor. I think a lot of people use chaos with a misunderstanding of chaos. So what did your gentleman last week? What was his version of what
he's one of the people. He was one of the people. I can't pronounce his last name, but he's one of the people who, along with Peter Carroll, actually first developed some of the ideas of sort of formal chaos magic, like way back in the 70s and 80s. And so the way he described it was chaos magic is really more about kind of knowing what the interior rules, it does involve, as you describe, a kind of understanding of multiple systems and sort of levels on how they work. And then it's working with probabilities more than anything else, and understanding how probabilities in any given set of circumstances or arenas or topic areas or beings, you have to know like multiple levels of rules. But being able to figure out kind of the interior way in which cause and effect works between levels, I guess that's the way he described it. And it sounded to me an awful lot like what Austin Spare referred to it, used in his sigil magic, because it's really a kind of more intuitive understanding of how this over here might relate to this over here, or they might actually be the same thing. It's just they're on different levels. They're in sort of different arenas of activity, but they're connected. And it has a lot to do with intuition, some to do with feeling. It's very personal. So it is more to do with like your connection to that. And that's what makes it kind of difficult to teach.
Yes.
And because so really what he was talking about was, because he and I got into a discussion of ice magic, which is like a subset of chaos magic, which is even more specific, that has to do with particular ways in which some individuals figure out how to focus their will in certain sort of arenas and areas of life, and not necessarily in a negative way, but just, it's almost like, I'll just put it this way. It's like if someone decided they were going to become like a bodhisattva or something, and they figured out how they could project themselves past death into these certain levels and then operate and actually appear or be present to people beyond the grave, but in a willed fashion,
Yes.
Not in a just sort of, ad hoc, oh, I'm dead now.
Yeah.
And the reason that's important is because there are a lot of different groups. I mean, Tibetan Buddhists are, Pure Line Buddhists are one, but there are a lot of other groups. Like I work a lot with the Algonquin peoples here in the Northeast. I have several native teachers who've been gracious enough to kind of teach me some of their stuff, or at least allow me to learn some of their stuff. And one of the things they talk about here are a group of beings that are called land keepers. And land keepers are humans they were human at one time, who took a very specific kind of vow at a particular point in their development, their spiritual development, before they died, in which they then, once they can project themselves into this spiritual realm. They do it a little bit before death, so it's not just after death, but it becomes fully manifest after death. And their goal in doing this is that they then act as sort of protectors of the natural world. but they are humans who have given themselves over to that. And they will, and they're not acting, and they're not doing this on behalf of other humans or of humanity. They're doing this on behalf of the planet.
Yeah.
So, if other humans get in the way, it's like, well, too bad, so sad. You know what I mean?
That's so interesting. I've never heard. So what is that called again?
The translation of the term is landkeeper.
I have to check that out. That's really interesting. And I want to touch on what you were talking about with chaos magic. And you're right. A lot of it is intention and intuition. That's a lot of what chaos magic is. Your intention on what you're doing and your intuition on what you're using. So that's really chaos magic in a nutshell. And so you're absolutely right. You basically described it exactly as I would have said it, but much better. I'll be honest with you. Much better. I tend to forget to really kind of slow down and go into better explanations because I talk about a lot of this stuff so much that you tend to lose that explaining the vocabulary type of thing. But yeah.
Hold on. Jeffrey is trying to get back in.
Okay.
He just messaged me, so I had to look at it.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
So, how then does the magic that you do, does this connect I'm assuming it does, connect to your investigations? Does it help with your investigations?
Yes.
How do you utilize that?
Well, I have gotten so far into a lot of my magic work that my tools a lot of times are minimal because a lot of the times whatever I need is not really that hard to do. So when you've worked with chaos magic for so long, you tend to almost be able to bypass a lot of those spices and herbs and smells and things like that and just use your intuition. And it's helped develop some psychic abilities as well. But so a lot of times I do incorporate that. When I had my really intense Bigfoot experience where we got corralled and pushed out of the woods and off the mountain, I had drawn a sigil on the ground. It was a directional sigil that was supposed to represent life and love. And then I added directional lines and it seemed to draw them in enough to be curious. So I even used it on Bigfoot or other cryptid investigations as well. And it tends to come in handy. It's a unique way of researching the way that we utilize it.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask is because there is sort of this ongoing discussion. I belong to several online Facebook and other paranormal investigative groups. A lot of these are sort of older people, old like me, who've been doing this for a long time, and they've, a lot of the conversation, because John Keel, if you know who John Keel was, John Keel, he of course drew the connection between magical work and occultism and paranormal activity, because he felt that all of this stuff was sort of tapping into the same kind of unseen realities, and that's part of why, in a particular area, you won't just, if you really look at stuff, you rarely will just get UFOs. You'll get UFOs and you'll get an increase in ghost activity and you'll get some cryptid stuff going on. And even if it's not going on at exactly the same time, it'll often occur in tandem, like over a series of months in the same area. And then he said that you would also find a kind of an increase in certain kinds of occult activity or reported occult activity, or people claiming that they were having, paranormal or occult experiences that maybe didn't have anything to do specifically with ghosts or anything. They'd be having odd dreams, or weird synchronicities,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
That's exactly right. And that also leads into the idea that a lot of this cryptid / ghost / whatever, anything paranormal, it all seems to overlap and connect somehow. And there's one defining thing that really is throughout all those types of paranormal things, and that is fairy lights or will-o-wisp or ignis fatuus. Those are all the same thing. They're just floating balls of light. And that is the thing that seems to connect all parts of paranormal.
Yeah.
When you have a UFO experience, a lot of times there's balls of light. A Bigfoot experience, a lot of times there's balls of light. Ghost experience, obviously balls of light. Then they're called fairy lights for a reason, because they tie into fairy lore. So these balls of light are what I believe not connects them, but is an attribute that flows throughout all of them. And I think that understanding those can help us understand paranormal activity as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that probably what they might be are, momentary openings or intrusions of some type, sort of a signal that in a particular area an energy is changing, or an energy is sort of entering in or interacting. Maybe interacting is a better way of putting it, because the invisible world only seems invisible to us because we don't see it. It's right there. It's like there's no real division at all. It's just that we're really focused. We can only detect certain frequencies. So it's actually, there's stuff probably going on all the time. Well, I'm sure there is all the time, interacting with us. I'm sure somebody's sitting right here staring at me, right here. I just can't see it, so, sometimes I'm really aware of things that are like maybe in the corners of my room, or, I'll hear stuff. I don't see things very often, but I often hear things. If I see something, then it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
I don't see stuff really, but I do hear things, and I have actually witnessed, like, I don't usually see beings, but I have witnessed physical objects changing or moving without any kind of visible way by which they could do that.
That's interesting.
So I've known that there is something happening there,
Yeah.
But I'm not like Jeffrey. I haven't seen he's had all of these real visual experiences. I've had a few, but not very many. But mostly because I think they scare the crap right out of me. There's something about actually seeing, for me, actually seeing something that I don't know. I mean, it's not that it's not that I'm actually scared of it, but there's something that's so uncanny about it, right at the moment, that it just, there is a part of me that's like, I'm going to go over here now.
You know what? I totally, I side with you on that, because it's the same for me. I really have spent a lot of my life trying to push out any visuals, and it worked for quite a while, but then it became where it worked a little too well. So then I had to open myself back up again and allow them to start showing themselves to me again, because it became a handicap for me. Right. The fact that I couldn't really see them anymore. So, but I don't really see them as people often. That's a very rare occasion. Usually it's just shadows or flits of shadows. But yeah, there was something else I was going to touch on that you had talked. Oh, you believe, I totally agree with you about how those little balls of light could possibly be openings, or some sort of spatial disrupt. And I don't disagree with you at all, because in my research, I have discovered that a lot of times when you have these little flashes of balls of light, or floating balls of light, sometimes they're either leading up to or followed by a sort of cracking or popping sound.
Yeah.
If you're close enough. And I was lucky enough to be a part of it's supposed to be the third haunted location in the United States. And I was a volunteer there for quite some time. And that place is notorious for those. So I was lucky enough to get to use my volunteer time to also research this sort of phenomena at the same time. So it was really cool. So it helped me understand that, yes, I came to the same conclusion that you did based on my research there, that this seems more like a spatial disrupt, almost like a portal. something's coming in or leaving.
Yeah,
So,
or signaling it's leaving.
yes.
Or something, something like that. I mean, yeah, I mean, I live in the Mid-Hudson Valley, and it's really known for all of these kinds of experiences, like over a long period of time. And, almost everyone I know who's had some kind of odd experience, whether it's been a UFO or a ghost or Bigfoot or whatever's happening here, which is like all of the above, that they at some point have had an experience with lights. Now they vary. There are different kinds. Like my friend Gail, who founded the Bigfoot Research Society of the Hudson Valley here, she went for many, many, many years believing that Bigfoot, and this was based on an experience that she had when she was young, that Bigfoot was, just a physical animal, and that was it, and so she was going to really try to figure out like what this physical animal was. And I think, and I do think there are like physical features to the phenomena sometimes, but then she had, and then she had an experience that completely altered her brain about it. And it was a group experience that she and about 8 other people had at a site where they were having a variety of Bigfoot experiences. The landowner there had invited them to come on. They'd come on with all of their typical Bigfoot gear, including like a FLIR camera and all that kind of stuff, right? And so they had gone down to the place. It was like there was like a stream at the end of his property, and that stream was like the border between that guy's property and the neighbor's property. And it was around that stream that the activity was really focused. So they'd gone down to that stream, and they were going to, turn on their cameras and see what they could film. And as soon as they got down there, they started being pelted with rocks, which is really normal. And so one of the guys switched on, the FLIR camera, and as soon as he did that, pandemonium broke out. It went nuts. They have some video of it that was taken from a little bit further away. The guy did manage to capture FLIR images of at least five somethings on.
Wow.
But they couldn't really stay down there for very long, because all of a sudden these, whatever they were, started tearing the woods up, like breaking trees and just going insane. But they would not cross the stream. It was like there was some kind of a barrier or a rule about that. But they were hit. Most of the guys were hit with what appeared to be some kind of pulse or infrasound or something, because all of a sudden the guys started getting really sick. They started throwing up. My friend, who's a woman, she was not affected by it. But all the guys were affected by it. And then in the middle of this pandemonium, and I'll never forget the first time she told me this, because she was just like gobsmacked. It's like all of her Catholic training was like, and just blown it completely over, She said, all of a sudden, this blue light shot straight up into the sky.
Wow.
It disappeared. And as soon as it disappeared, everything went dead silent. Just boom, just like that. And it was gone.
Oh my gosh.
And of course they hightailed it back into the house, going, and so I've seen the FLIR footage. I've seen the still and video footage of, you can hear stuff that's going on, right? But you can't, it's obviously dark. This was at night, so you can't like see, but you can hear stones being thrown. You can hear trees being destroyed. I've seen the photos of the damage that was done to the trees afterwards the next day. So something real and physical happened, but there was also this light that went up and boom, everything was gone. So it's like, how do you explain that? And she was just like, I don't know what this means. And I said, well, what it means is that you don't know what that is. We don't know what that is what that means. It's like,
and you have to rethink your research.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but I told her, I said, now think about this though. It's like, if these creatures were this strong that they could rip up those trees, then they could have killed all of you. But they didn't.
Right.
They didn't. That means that there is some rule that they have. There's some law that they're operating under. And they were real, and they started doing this as soon as they turned their cameras on. So in some level, they knew, even in the darkness, that they were being recorded. And that was like, she's learned since then not to take cameras openly into the woods. Yeah. What they use are these little, Coleman makes these glasses that have little video cameras on them right here. And so she just puts those glasses on and they just walk around.
Nice.
And so they get footage, and then she takes the footage home and she downloads it, and then, because it's digital, and then since it's digital, you have to do it this way. Then she advances it like in increments of like 1/8 of a second. And what's weird is that she picks up images, like it's like, 1/8 of a second, there will be an image like a fox-like creature near someone, and then the next 1/8 of a second, it'll be gone. But that's too fast for an animal to have run in or not, and nothing like that was seen. So they have these wild, it's just like ghost stuff, like always going. It's really cool. So that's how she does Bigfoot.
I love it. I'm super curious. Does she have her stuff posted anywhere, or does she kind of keep it?
She has some of it on Facebook. Hold on, Jeffrey has just.
She'll have to look me up. I would love to check it out. Very curious.
Okay. Basically, what's going on with Jeffrey? He's waiting for Joe to let him back in. Essentially, a storm is moving in, and that's probably he's down in Georgia, so that's probably what is causing his problems. It's Bigfoot Researchers of the Hudson Valley. Her name is Gail Beatty. She has posted. She does have a Facebook page. I haven't seen her posting much lately because she's been undergoing a knee replacement surgery. So she's about my age, and so we're starting to break down. But she has posted some stuff there. So if you have a Facebook account, you could probably check that out.
Yeah,
she's got up there. But yeah, she's done some interesting. She's done some really interesting things.
That's super interesting. I enjoy hearing about
kind of taking the ghost hunting stuff,
yes,
the field, like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I tend to do a lot. A lot of my research style is blended, no matter where I am. So I'll try some different things everywhere. And I love hearing about other people's research. So I'm really excited to ask her if, she'll let me check out some of her work, because that's the way we learn. We learn by learning from others. Our research ideas and the way we research, those are gained not just from when we research, but also by learning from others. How are you supposed to learn how to do unique things when you're not really a creative person? If you're not really a creative person, unless you're watching and learning from other people. So I would love to check out her work.
Right. They've gotten really interesting EVP out in the field too.
Oh, in a Bigfoot area?
Yeah, in Bigfoot area. Like they've taken spirit boxes out there and have just out of curiosity, just to see if something would something would, and they've gotten really interesting strange things that they don't make any sense, but it's not like ghost stuff. It's different than ghost stuff. It's not like with ghost stuff, you'll if you get good EVP, it's when the ghosts answer you, when there's actually an answer to a question. In this instance, they tend to get not so much answers to things as they do kind of interesting patterns of phrases. And they'll also get these guttural sounds that can't really, that are clearly not static, but you can't really understand them. They're not like, they sound like words, but not English words, like not human words. And occasionally, they'll sort of test it, and they'll kind of be like, well, the wondering if this is just like weird garbage that's coming through the machine. And then the machine will like say one of their names.
Oh, nice.
So in order to indicate that, no, this is a communication of some type, but it's not, we're not ghosts, we're not spirits. This is different. And this is like outside in open fields.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's very interesting. I mean, I've heard a lot of that stuff. So I have no idea what it means. I mean, I don't have a clue. I don't know what message they're trying to give or what message is being relayed by whom. I don't know if it's Bigfoot or somebody else. I don't have a clue, And
I think those are one of those instances where you get that form of trickery. They've seen those entities there and they're mimicking them of sorts, which adds an even more spectral aspect to the already strange Bigfoot experiences. So, yeah.
I mean, I didn't really think that much about Bigfoot myself when I moved up here, because I was more of a UFO kind of ghost kind of person. And then I had a Bigfoot experience quite out of the blue that just freaked me out, completely unexpected. And so I, did Googling and everything. It's like, oh, they have those here. Oh, who
they
knew?
have those everywhere.
I did not know. And so that's how I sort of got involved with that too. But it is interesting. The native traditions here indicate that that for some reason this particular part of the world, the Hudson Valley, is a highly active spiritual place. So there's a lot of what is reported here has been reported since before settlers were here. So like the spirit lights, like in the Catskills, there's right by Woodstock is right in front of a mountain that's called Overlook Mountain. And that's the English name for it. And people still routinely see these like orange lights coming off of it at different times during the year. And I asked one of my, native teachers around here about that, so do you have any stories about these orangish yellow lights that they see coming off of Overlook? And he was like, oh, those are the spirit ships.
Oh,
those are the spirit ships, and what he meant by that is that in Algonquin thinking in the Northeast, as you go up a mountain, like you go up the cat, one of the Catskill peaks, as you go up, you're not just ascending a mountain, you're ascending kind of levels of spirit.
Yeah.
So towards what for us is the sky, but for them is outer space, which means that's where the spirits are. I mean, outer space is where the spirits are. And we're actually, they have this understanding that the earth is contained in space. There isn't an out there. We're in it, which is true anyway, even physically.
Yes.
But as you're going up a mountain, you go up, there's like 12 levels, and you go up to, and what the spirit ships do is they travel through those levels. So they're sort of traveling not only like in the atmosphere up and down, they're also going through different spiritual levels as they go up, which is really interesting.
It is.
I
hadn't heard of that.
Yeah. Well, some of this stuff isn't written down.
Yeah.
It's oral tradition. And so I was given the whole thing about when you're in the woods. In fact, you're not supposed to go into the woods by yourself at night. You just don't do it. You just don't do it. Not only because you'll find bears and other, but there are other, as I was told, as Iroquois told me, it's like this, humans live in houses or whatever, human abode. You're going into somebody else's house when you do that. So there are animals out there, but there are also other folks out there. And so there's this whole litany about if the lights are orange or yellow or white, then they're okay. Then those are good. Those are good indicators. If they are red or green or blue, then you have to be more careful. Because they're not evil, but they may be tricking you. They may be tricksters. So that's just what I've been told here. Yeah. Well, I don't know if that's true everywhere else. I don't know if there's like a universal color code.
I don't know. A lot of what seems to be positive experiences that are often intended to be like a teaching experience has evolved blue and green lights. So that's very interesting that those are supposed to be the ones you're cautious about. So I'm going to have to look more into that. I've heard of people try to assign meanings with colors in these floating lights before. However, I'm not going to say they always, but a lot of times they seem to not really be an accurate deduction. So I want to check out this one and kind of see,
it might be a regional thing,
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? I mean, I know that you're always you're cautioned here. In fact, I shouldn't be talking about this at all because it's summer. So I need to do something else. Hold on. I need to do something else right here. We're not supposed to talk about the little people during the summertime. But I'll have to do I will have to do a tobacco offering later on now that I've done this. But the reason why they hesitate to talk about them very much, or they encourage humans not to have interaction with them if they can, is because you can't really tell by looking. Humans can't tell by looking what their intentions are. And so there are procedures. Indigenous people have procedures by which one contacts them or speaks to them, or then there are specialists who do that sometimes.
Interesting.
But around here, the Munsee and the Abenaki and the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee are like a confederacy of the Mohawk and the Seneca. There's 6 nations in the confederacy, but they're like to white people, don't talk to them because you don't know who you're talking to. And they have several different nations and tribes of them, So I figured it might be a regional thing. They might know who the folks are that they're talking to around here, and some of them are good and some of them don't like humans very well. Some of them are pissed at humans, which I can understand that.
Yes.
And some are helpful, some are willing to help.
Yeah.
So, and that's all I'll say about them because I don't want them to come into my house tonight.
You bring up giving the offering of tobacco, and that's really interesting because a lot of times you see these gifts of offering over multiple different types of things, like the little people. I don't know. I don't really know if I should be worried or not because I'm white, but
where are you? Are you in the Northeast?
yeah, actually.
Where are you?
I'm in Ohio.
Okay. Well, Ohio's land could always use more tobacco anyway, considering all the things that happened there.
Yes. But it's, and then with Bigfoot, if a lot of people do like almost like a sort of gifting, because they're leaving out peanut butter and stuff like that and gadgets for them to mess with and rocks. They're giving them something. And the fairy lore, you gift fairies and you gift gnomes and you gift your little house elves. And there's a lot of gifting that seems to go on within the paranormal. A lot of times it's viewed as not good in some aspects, and sometimes it's viewed as good in some aspects. A lot of times the reason it's viewed as not good is because when you start offering, they expect that. And then when you take that away, they get angry.
Yes.
And they lash out.
Yeah, well, you're right. Exactly. Just a minute. I have to do chat. It's hard for me to talk and write at the same
That's okay.
time in chat.
That's okay.
He's just letting me know he's Joe probably left the studio for a little while, and that's why there's been a delay. So anyway, hold on just a second. Here, whenever. All right. Okay, there we go. All right. Yeah, where are you in Ohio?
I'm kind of central Ohio.
Columbia?
Like Columbus area, yeah.
Columbus, okay. Yeah, I mean, Ohio is a very active. I mean, Ohio is a weird state. I'm not trying to put Ohio down. It is. It's a strange state because it's got a lot of stuff that happens in it paranormally. I mean, it really does. It's also a really haunted state. If you know the history between indigenous people, and not only indigenous people and settlers, but indigenous people with each other in that area. It's a very interesting. It's a very interesting state. There's a lot of, I would say, haunted real estate.
Yes.
Ohio.
I do love Ohio for that. So there's always something to explore and something to research here. And I mean, there's been times where I've researched things I wouldn't think I would research, like a gnome in Ohio. So it's very, very curious that you can find just about every type of entity in Ohio, or a semblance thereof, you know?
Right. Yeah. It's an interesting. I mean, I mean, when I think of Ohio, mostly I think about it as I'm driving, because a lot of my family's in Kansas and Iowa, so it's like if I drive, which is how I get there mostly, because I won't fly if I don't have to. I have to drive through Ohio, and so my experience of Ohio is that as soon as I hit Ohio, I go into like a temporal time warp. And it's like it feels like it takes longer to get through Ohio than it does to drive through Pennsylvania, which is longer. So I don't know exactly what that is about Ohio that's like a time sink. Mm-hmm. but I'm not the only person who's experienced that, apparently. It's like, why is Ohio taking so long to get through?
Try living in it. There's times where I'll be driving to work and I'll think, oh my gosh, I'm going to be late. I got to be there in 45 minutes. And somehow I made it there in 20, you know? So, and then there's other times where you'll be sitting here and everything will be normal. And the next thing you know, it's like almost like it feels like everything did a flop, almost like you switch realities in a way. And I'm not saying that's what happens, but that's the feeling that it is. It's like everything just changes so quickly. And I call it a slip is what I call it. But yeah, what it is, I'm not sure.
Okay, you just asked when the show was supposed to. Yeah, okay. Because Jeffrey forgot to mention that to you at the beginning. Okay. And I think it's because we got started a little bit late. Mm-hmm. But normally, are you on Central or Eastern? Eastern. Okay. So it normally ends, because I'm on Eastern, obviously, too. It normally ends at about 9:50. So you've got about 20 minutes now. Okay,
it's fine. I just wasn't sure, because a lot of times I try to help not go over by knowing when it stops.
No, that's fine.
Because a lot of times I talk and I'll talk and I'll talk if I'm allowed. I get away with myself and they'll say, okay, we need to end now.
Well, that's fine too. I mean, usually people like that are considered to be good guests because the hosts didn't have to say very much.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So it's perfectly fine. So tell me what has been the most interesting thing that you have researched?
Oh, the most interesting thing.
Or the thing that you think about and you like, wow, that was really the most cool thing.
Probably, I came into the building I was telling you about, feeling like there was something there that was similar to the entity that follows me around. So I became immediately attached to this building, and I became attached to it because this one particular very big energy. This energy was very big. It kind of oversaw the other energies. It was intertangled and intertwined with the building itself. Come to find out, I came to the conclusion that it was an egregor of sorts. It was there pre the building. There was a group, a tribe of Native Americans that had resided up over the hill. That was where their tribe was, and they were all attacked and killed by white people. So their theory is that they could have in death created an egregore to try to protect the land that they knew was theirs. And then later on, that building was put there. Mm-hmm. This entity was very old. It did not ever feel human in any way. And it was one of the most unique entities I've ever gotten to research, in that it worked so well with me. When I sat down and I really kind of laid out why I was there, what I wanted to do, it was like it opened up to me. And it got to a point where it wanted to communicate a lot with only me around. Or it would become angry, aggressive, and lash out when people were communicating with it, when I hadn't been there for a while to calm it down again. And I think that you see that a lot in these entities who have never been human, like tulpas and egregors and, other types of energetically created entities. They've never been alive. They don't understand emotion. They don't understand what death is. They don't understand physical pain. They don't understand mental trauma. They don't have a lot of that. So when working with entities like that, it's basically you're teaching them how to feel. You're teaching them how to compromise and how to get along with the living. So this one was one of the biggest entities that I was able to work with that was like that. Still, I wonder if he was even more than egregore, honestly, because his presence was so large and so commanding. But that was the most unique entity I got to work with. And I was thrilled to get to do it. And when I say that I research and I talk about it, I say the entities I got to work with. I don't say the things that I cast out. I feel like a lot of times I tend to work with varieties of entities. I have dealt with a few demons. I have, and they're not fun. And there's no working with them. But they're a lot fewer and far between than a lot of people realize.
Right.
Yeah. And, my youngest experience with researching a demonic entity was when I was 17, and it stuck with me for a long time. And it pushed me out of the paranormal for a bit of time, because I guess when you're 17, you don't have a lot of research under your belt. You don't realize what you're getting into. And I did get over my head. And it stuck with me for a while, and I had missing time. It was very much an oppressive state of living. But now, a lot of times you can tell when you're walking in a situation with an entity that's not good and won't work with you.
Right. Well, it becomes pretty obvious.
Yeah.
It is interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with Paul Eno's work. He's a researcher out of Rhode Island, and he has a collaborator, a colleague whose name is Shane Siroy. And Shane has kind of a natural gift for, walking into say a house where they're having problems with some kind of entity or experiences that seem very, very negative, almost parasitical in a way, and maybe is resulting in certain kinds of weird kind of reality bleed throughs and poltergeist activities and that kind of stuff. And he has a gift for walking in there and kind of connecting with whatever that entity is, and kind of figuring out like what its purpose there is and kind of what brought it in. Because a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, if there's sort of a latent presence in in a dwelling in particular, certain problems that certain residents will have, they'll bring into that environment, that they will actually kind of interact with whatever that presence is, and it kind of makes it worse. So it's not, it's not saying that the people there are the sole cause of it, but they can often, if there's already kind of a problem there, the people that come in with problems can create an even larger set of issues. And so he has this ability to walk into those situations and kind of read the situation and help them, if they want to, fix it, and not necessarily drive the entity out, because that's often not the issue. Sometimes it's that the entity wants to connect with whoever they're living with, because they're living all in the same space, kind of. Mm-hmm. But the people, the humans, are too scared to do that, and so they react really negatively, and they kind of feed the whole thing with sort of negative vibes or fear, and then that kind of creates a separate set of problems. So it's very, very interesting.
Yeah. And and you're absolutely right. And that kind of goes into, what I was talking about earlier, how what you give entities is a lot of times what you get back. So, right. If you go in expecting to get a horrible experience, a lot of times that's what you'll get. So if you go in expecting to be able to communicate and compromise with entities, then they'll be more willing to do that. So I don't disagree with you whatsoever. And I think that you're right. A lot of homeowners tend to fear these things, and it makes the situation worse, because the energy that they're giving it, that they're feeding it, is a negative type of energy. So then that's the same type of energy that's pushed back out from those entities. And I'm not saying that that's not showing intelligence in these entities, but I would get really mad if somebody was always acting afraid of me when I was trying to talk to them.
Well, it's kind of like, they may, I don't know exactly how they're experiencing it on their end, but they may experience it as a kind of attack.
Yeah.
And so they're sort of defending themselves in an odd kind of way, or just mirroring back what they're experiencing being, connected to them. But no, Paul Eno's stuff you would probably like. He's written a number of books. You can get them on Amazon, and
I've heard of him.
He's done some really interesting work with. He's had some really interesting experiences with like experiencing parallel realities, like realities that are like right next to ours. And maybe these realities are like versions of the realities that we're in, the many worlds thing. He's got some really, because I've had that experience myself. That's one of the more common experiences I've had, is where two or more like probable worlds in a room will sort of merge, and I'll kind of see different versions of like how this room is in a slightly different reality. And it's very interesting. And sometimes there are other beings there, and sometimes there aren't. I don't usually see them, but I can kind of sense them. So he's had some really interesting time things too.
Yeah. I'm very curious about your ability to kind of see the things around you almost change, as if you're seeing them in another dimension. That's really interesting to me, because I've had that, but not very often, but I've had that. But a lot of times what I've realized with me it's a time slip. It's like I'm seeing into another time zone rather than another dimension.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been able to figure out that the layout of buildings was off and that there was areas that hadn't been explored and things like that because of that, or that there was additions added that they had never realized was an addition. They thought it was always there. I'll see it gone.
Mm-hmm.
Just like plain as day. It's like I'm looking right in front of me, solid as can be. All of a sudden it's gone. I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah, I've had experiences like that too. I've had experiences where all of a sudden I realized I've stepped into a slightly different reality.
Yes.
And that's pretty, that has only happened a couple of times, but that's pretty weird when that happens.
Scary.
It's kind of like, oh, and it's just, it's just enough of a change. It's not huge. It's just enough of a change that I think to just kind of indicate that that's what's happened.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that what clued me into all of this years ago, I attribute whatever faculty I have to do that to some of my work in Tibetan Buddhism, because there are specific practices that are done in a discipline that's called dream yoga, where you're actually learning how to do versions of that, of what I'm talking about. It's within a certain framework, but you can apply it to other things. But you're learning that the dream world, we think of the dream world and this world are really, there's no difference at all. And so you learn techniques whereby to kind of see through the physical reality that to us seems very solid. Yes. And I've had these really extraordinary experiences where and you purposely create interior worlds, like very elaborately. You purposely create them in these practices, and then learn to map them onto the world, this world here. And I've had some really amazing experiences where it's like, oh my God,
that's interesting.
So there's like these two worlds that I've created that they're real.
Yeah.
And other people I know have visited them. So it's like, there they are. I know that sounds really fucking weird. Oh, sorry.
No.
I just used the F word. I'm sorry. There's a delay on this, so they'll edit that.
Okay, good.
It's like, but anyway, there's I know it sounds really weird, but it does. It
doesn't sound weird to me at all, because I've done the same thing, but on accident. I've had people come to me. I tend to dream share a lot with people, and they'll say, "Did you dream about this last night?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, yeah, I did." And it can be people that I don't even really know very well.
Right.
It's like that we connect on a different level than the physical level, and they are immediately able to travel with me through dreams. I guess it's a very strange idea, but I can't explain it any other way, because I have had so many people come and tell me basically very similar things about what happened in my dreams. They're like, "Did this happen?" I'm like, "Yeah, basically." Maybe a slight bit difference here and there, but yeah, I mean, it's really similar, really close. But in a way, that's almost the way I do my magic with my intention is I build and I create a scenario that I'm aiming for. And that scenario, I guess it's a sort of manifestation type situation where you can almost manifest into being, very much like your created world. You're manifesting that into being. So that shows that you're a very psychically strong person and you've reached a certain level of advancement. So I find that very interesting. I could honestly pick your brain for hours.
Well, there you go. The other source that I've used, which I recommend for all people who are wanting to explore some of these ideas, if you're familiar with this at all, is the Seth material, because the Seth material actually delves pretty deeply. If you're familiar with who Jane Roberts was, she was a medium who worked in the 60s and 70s. She died in the early 80s, she manifested. I mean, we say channeled, but that's not really correct. I mean, it wasn't like a spirit guide that came through her. It was another I mean, the way she describes it, it was a personality essence which was connected to her at a different level. And so, but a lot of the exercises that are given through that material are really, really similar to what we've been talking about. Working with dreams, working with the similar kinds of practices like that I had learned already doing the Tibetan yoga stuff. But what's nice about her material is that it's non-sectarian. She and her husband were artists. She was a writer and he was a visual artist. And so they came to this material without a lot of preconceptions. They were not like into spiritualism or into the psychic world. They were not, they came into it as sort of pragmatic, creative people and understood that all of this work, which, we would call psychic work or whatever, but all of this work is really part of the larger creative legacy that human beings have as simply part of our consciousness. And that, so their work isn't dogmatic. It's not, it's not sectarian. It's not connected to any particular religious or spiritual school or angle. It's its own thing. And Seth, this personality essence that comes through her, he talks about UFOs and Bigfoot and who and what these different things are and what occultism is. I mean, it's just part of the package of everything he does. And it's not like he's dogmatic about it. It's like, yeah, there are these beings that have lived on Earth that you can't really see all the time. And the reason you can't is they don't want you to.
Yeah, I actually know what you're talking about. I remember that about halfway through. I was like, oh, I know Seth. Okay, so that was her entity that a lot of times would communicate with her and give her information. I remember now.
Yeah, there's like Seth Speaks and the Nature of Personal Reality, and the Individual and the Nature of Mass Events, which is a great book. And so but that's the other source from which a lot of my stuff has come. So
nice.
I've worked with that stuff I was doing that stuff really before I kind of got into, well, I guess I was always interested in UFOs, but because I had a UFO experience when I was like 6, a really close one with a friend who was 6.
Wow.
But although I didn't know what it was and it scared me to death, but and this is back in the 60s. I mean, I'm an old person. So, but yeah, I mean, what you're saying seems to map on really well to all this, to what for me is like, yeah, this is what we've been doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So pretty much.
So you've had the privilege of sort of being taught and learning this stuff sort of as you go.
Yeah. Because I didn't even find out about her until, and I didn't find out her books either. Which they weren't books, right? They were more like
they were the books. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. They were books, but I got to read maybe few little clips, but I never really got to actually get into the book. So all of my information has come from my experiences. So I love that that's the case, because that adds a sort of, it adds a sort of validation to the theories that I've come up with in my own research, because I'm not the only one that's come to those conclusions. So that's kind of nice to hear that.
Well, reality is reality. So, wherever if we're going to be talking about reality, then we're going to be bumping up against the same stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not that unusual, except that it is very cool to hear about all the different types of experiences that people have.
Yes. Yeah, and we can learn from that too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, we're running up against the last 5 minutes. So what kinds of things would you like to tell the listeners about where they can connect with you, or like if you have a website or a blog or anything like that?
Well, I have some writing that will be coming out hopefully within the next few months. But aside from that, a lot of my research that I do share, I share it on my personal Facebook page. So if you're curious to see what I'm up to or what kind of stuff I've done recently, just pop onto my Facebook. But I also have a group, Uncharted Studies. And that's a really fun group just because there's just a couple people in it. And a lot of the posts you see are usually by me or, the other person. So, but there's a really great convention coming up. It's the Michigan Bigfoot Conference.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be one of the conferences that's going to be talked about for a while. The speaker lineup's huge. So they still have speaker sponsor spots available. People want to jump on those for either individual support, just show the speaker that they support them, or if they want to advertise utilizing this route while also supporting the speakers, it's a great way to do that. So I'm really pushing for, a lot of speaker sponsors because these speakers that are going to be at this convention are a lot of them are my friends. So I want them to really enjoy their experience and maybe come back for the next year's one. So I want to make sure that they not only enjoy it, but that, they get some sort of financial compensation. They go out there and they work hard to research. And then we get to hear about all their research in one area, one little tiny sitting. We don't even have to do all the hard work. We just learn from their research. So I think that giving back to them by being a sponsor is a good thing. And you can do that on MichiganBigfootConference.com. So,
and is that something that you're helping to organize?
I am not, actually. I'm not a part of this convention, but I befriended one of them at a recent convention I went to, one of the people who was kind of hosting it. And I offered to, help try to get some speaker sponsors for the speakers.
Well, right, exactly. Okay, that's cool. Okay, so that's the Michigan Bigfoot.
Yes, Michigan Bigfoot.
And when is that happening?
That's going to be July 17th.
And it's going to be, because I know people in New York are going to be like, okay, so what are the COVID restrictions?
As far as it looks like there's not really going to be any restrictions. I think that if you're kind of walking around, I think you have to wear a mask. But by the time the actual convention happens, they might even lift that. So it's actually a lot looser than what you're probably experiencing right now. So
right. Yeah, we're just all becoming accustomed to taking our masks off.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels weird to go in stores without masks here in Ohio because they've lifted all the restrictions down.
Yeah. Well, here we still have to, let's see. It's up to individual business owners.
Yes.
So some businesses, especially restaurants, because there's food happening.
Yeah.
It's like when you walk in, you have to wear a mask. And depending on how their seating is, like if they're seating you in groups, then once you start eating, you can take your mask off.
Right. I actually kind of miss when all the workers had to wear masks when they were making food because I'm a little bit of a germaphobe and I'm like, mask, no spit in my food. And now all the masks are gone. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I know. Well, all the restaurants I've been into, and like at the grocery stores, all the workers are still wearing masks.
Yeah, some of them aren't here. I've noticed they still are, but some of them are.
Yeah, we're gonna all have to get used to this again. I am sort of, I guess, a germaphobe a little bit. I've never really liked the fact that at least initially in our culture before this, that, there were lots of people who walked around who would cough and sneeze and not even cover their mouth. That just,
yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. It's like, why are you doing that? Do you understand? There could be, oh, look. Oh my God.
Right at the end. And he's not there.
And there's an empty chair. Hi. Hey. Jeffrey, there's an empty chair.
You look different.
There's Joe. Hey, Joe.
Did he get probed or something? What's going on here?
No. Actually, what happened is that apparently he's having storms where he is, and so
not unusual for Florida.
Yeah. So I have to confess something, Joe. I accidentally said the F word.
Yeah, you're okay. Remember, we always got this 5-second delay. So
Okay, all right, great. I thought we had a delay.
It doesn't matter on the internet. It doesn't matter. You can cuss all you want. They don't care. It's just the FM side, and that's why we have that little box in there, just to keep the FM from getting us. We don't want to get the FCC on our ass. That's for sure.
That's true. So thank you very much for being a lovely guest.
Thank you. And it was lovely coming on, and I loved getting to talk to you. And I hope that maybe we can sit down and have another little chit chat, because I love the way you go about your research, and I love the way you think. So
well, thank you. But you can poke Jeffrey to. I'm on Facebook. Here, I tell you here.
We love Jeffrey, but sometimes.
Yeah. I'm giving you my Facebook page right there. If you want.
All right. Yes. Thank you so much. Yes. Well, chit chat a little bit. I love it.
That'd be fine. That'd be great. I love talking about this stuff too. So Joe, could you do the sign off? Because
yes, I will. I
don't know the sign off.
I will take us out of here. This is the Church of Mabus. I'm not Jeffrey Pritchett. I'm better looking than he is. So don't get crazy now. But anyway, welcome to the Church of Mabus. We're leaving now. Carol down there, the guest up top. I hope everybody enjoyed the show tonight. It's always a blast. Remember, coming up next is The Centralist. It's a panel show. It is also up for a People's Choice Award, so be sure to tune in for it. And on that note, guys, I'm going to turn y'all over to the ether. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Talk to you later. Bye.